Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me here once again. If you're joining me for the first time, my name is Derrick Michaels, and I'm a Baltimore-based saxophonist and improviser and concert presenter and teacher. And this is Thursday Thoughts, episode 2. I'm improvising every one of these videos, and I'm trying to keep it to 2 takes maximum. This is our second take, so whatever's here goes, which is scary. This isn't something that I do very often, so it's new and it's uncomfortable, but we're here. Thanks for being here with me. What I've recognized through the course of my life that has really been like heightened to almost fever pitch level intensity for me in the course of 2020, in now almost 8 months of being at home, of being a person who wakes up and spends just as much time organizing the house as I do organizing my thoughts or my ideas or practicing or whatever, listening to music, planning for the future. Something that's really become just ever present in my life is this recognition that I have a desire, even as a person who thrives on the moment being indeterminate to some degree, to possibilities being wide open. There is this fascination that I've had with the fact that every time I make a committed choice, let's use music as the example. Every time I choose to make this sound like this, and not that sound like that, I'm taking a completely wide open parameter, like infinite possibilities. And by making one choice, I have closed the parameters immensely. Now, there are still thousands of decisions possible after that one note, that one sound, that one phrase, that one choice. But it isn't infinite anymore. So every time I assert an idea in the music, it does force what happens next to be from way out here into something much more focused. And not just for me, but for all the musicians on stage and for the audience who are sitting out in front participating in the music as well. We sit down, we have no idea what's going to happen, and then as soon as something does happen, we have a clearer idea of what might happen next. Surprises are inevitable, and yet the surprises happen when each successive development of an idea that happens across a performance, those ideas and those developments of ideas tend to follow some sort of internal logic, and the surprises come when something slashes across that texture and takes us in a whole new direction, opens up the territory again, maybe brings us back almost to that feeling of infinite possibility that we had at the very beginning before that first assertion. So if I zoom out away from music performance and away from improvised concerts and away from my practice as an improviser, and I think about what implication that has for people in our daily lives, I think what I recognize is a tendency to desire to take this world of seemingly infinite possibilities and make assertions that shrink those possibilities down to something that we can manage to try and understand. Questions, therefore, being fairly open-ended. If somebody asks you, how do I work to develop my ideas in a more clear way? That could be a question for any kind of an artist, really, or even just an orator of some sort. I had a friend of mine not even ask a question about that, but assert that was something that they appreciated in a recent video of mine of an improvised performance, and saying that that's an area that they're working on. It's an area that I'm always working on. So if someone were to ask a question, which I get in lessons all the time when I'm teaching, how do I develop the ideas that I'm working on? If I have a certain idea, what do I do? Where do I go from there? As soon as an idea is presented and it's understood as here's the idea, we're working within a very small amount of material, and so there are a lot of techniques and strategies that we can take that turn that idea into a world. But what's interesting to me is the question, how do I do this, is entirely open-ended. The answers are almost innumerable. What is concerning to me is that in the teacher-student relationship, so often the person who has been asked a question such as this feels the pressure in a lot of cases to assert a finite answer, to dispense with a piece of information that sends the student off into the world with this little piece of knowledge that they can hold on to, this finite understanding of something. And in most cases, that is closing off options rather than opening the student up to more options, opening us up to more options. So I'm going to conclude today's rant or meandering with an open-ended question. Do you feel like your daily creative musings, whether it's just you're going for a walk and you're thinking to yourself about your life, or you're sitting down with an instrument or a paintbrush or a typewriter and really getting into the meat of what it is that you do creatively, how much of your creative process do you feel is driven by inquiry and questions and burrowing into something and very open to what it is that the process is going to show you? How much of that process for you, the inspiration in that process for you, do you believe is derived from the questions themselves? And how much satisfaction do you feel is derived from arriving at what you believe an answer might be? I personally have felt over the course of years that in my experience as a musician, a creative person on my own, as a student, as somebody who is burrowing into the saxophone looking for answers, the joy for me tends to really come from the excitement about trying to find something out. And when I think I know, when I think I figured it out, when I think that something finite and predictable has been found in a particular area, I tend to abandon that for a pretty long time and search for the next rabbit hole to crawl into. And I think it has interesting implications for our relationship to this period of time that we're in 2020, with political uncertainty. It's November 5th. We're still waiting to figure out results of a presidential election, and the results of that could have dramatic implications for what life as an American looks like. The next number of months or years will determine a lot about what life is like in America as a result of this pandemic situation. I have no idea as a working musician what 2021 is going to look like for me at all. Lots of open-ended uncertainty, and I have many, many questions. And while I desire the answers to these questions, while I deeply wish that I could just fast forward and understand who's going to be president, when the pandemic is going to be over, when we're going to have a vaccine, when I am going to make it as an artist, and when my bank account isn't going to rely on X number of wedding gigs to fill out the rest of my financial needs from whatever it is that I do creatively as an improviser. All those things that are personal to me that might also be relatable to you. part of me wants to fast forward to the part where I know the answer. And I think that that's something that a lot of us deal with. There's this anxiety about needing to know. So my invitation to myself, and therefore also with you, my invitation for all of us here is to consider just how much of the potential of this moment, the rich, ripe, open-ended, powerful amount of untapped potential that lives right here while we're living in the future, grasping for some answers to questions that we have. How much are we missing out on that would be even more fulfilling if we could tap into that with at least as much vigor as we are investing into waiting for some resolution to come that might be out of our hands. So it's just something that I'm thinking about, and something that I don't even know that it's advice, but it's something that I know as a person who is always dealing with the unanswerable questions of what it means to be creative as a human in the 21st century. I'm deriving a great deal of satisfaction and joy and fulfillment from being able to ask these open-ended questions at home with a saxophone without needing to deliver some perspective on an answer to the questions that I'm posing. So your invitation, your challenge for this week is to become a little bit more self-aware of, your tendency to ask a question and your patience or impatience with trying to resolve something that might be open-ended forever. I think for a lot of us as improvisers in particular, especially those of us who come from a jazz background, our perspectives on what parameters we're utilizing and interacting with that we might call vocabulary, the raw materials that we're dealing with historically at this point, especially in the course of the academic presentation of jazz as an art form in the collegiate atmosphere, has largely been to take this wide open perspective on anything can happen at any time and boil it way down to these measurable categories: melody, harmony, rhythm, form, maybe thematic development, maybe a little bit of discussion about phrasing and leaving phrasing wide open to interpretation. There is this historical tendency for academic music instruction to be a bit reductionist and to say that this is what works. These are the chunks of vocabulary you need to know. These are the pieces of repertoire you need to know. And when somebody asks a question, well, what am I supposed to do in order to find my own voice? The correct answer is, right, to listen to your own question, to just ask the question over and over again. Don't try to give an answer. It's tricky because I'm sitting here giving you the answer to that question, the correct answer to that question. The important part of the question is the question. What happens next is an active question. It is a posture of possibility, which is the name of my concert series this year that is temporarily suspended in the course of 2020 while we're dealing with this pandemic. But posture of possibility, meaning what happens next, means, it's an upbeat, and at some point the answer will just be what happens when things resolve. But the interesting part is the tension of the question. The interesting part is the reaching toward. The interesting part is almost never getting what you want. It's going for it. It's leaning in. It's participating. It's taking responsibility. So I'm going to take responsibility for giving you your time back. Thank you for giving me your time and checking this out. If anybody's interested in having some discussion with me one-on-one about this, you can find my email address at baltimoresaxophone.com. I teach saxophone lessons. I teach improvisation lessons. I do coaching for teachers who are looking to expand your perspective on how to share this kind of information with other people, and to give these sorts of open-ended prompts in an effort to invite creativity. So if anybody has any interest in doing some work with me in those regards, don't hesitate to reach out. And take care of yourselves. I'll see you next Thursday. Signing off. Have a good day.